Welcome back. And we're moving into our first segment for today as we have a discussion about the work of UNICEF Belize over the past year and looking forward into 2018. And here with us on set, we have Michelle Segura, who's the Child Protection Officer for UNICEF Belize. In the middle, we have the Country Representative, Dr. Susan Kasedde. And on the end, we have Denise Roberto, who is the Early Childhood and Education Officer with UNICEF Belize. Good morning, ladies, and welcome.
Good morning.
It's always a great conversation, and I find that people are very comfortable talking about the situation of children in general. And we know that obviously your mandate in country is being able to work with children and families, improving their lives in conjunction with other entities. So I want to start off there. I know there's usually an analysis done, a report done on a yearly basis, looking at the situation. Where would you say we are in Belize?
Good morning, Marlene, and thank you again for having us, and Happy New Year.
Yes.
We did have an end-year review with partners. We're very fortunate to have the opportunity to, for two critical meetings at the end of 2017. First, we met with all of the partners that we have worked with in 2017 to support our three program priorities. Yeah. Number one, it is making sure that we improve our monitoring of children's rights. Mm-hmm. Number two, that we ensure every child can learn and thrive. And number three, ensuring that every child is safe and protected. And so we met and we assessed our progress, and we determined that in all three areas we have significant challenges to overcome, but then we are making progress through partnerships, through commitment to funding, but also through the kind of evidence that we're making available to support advocacy and effective targeting of programs and resources. So that's what we've learned at the end of the year through the discussion with our partners. The second important meeting that we had was with the CEOs from multiple sectors in government, because what we recognized is that to address those challenges that we've identified with our partners, we really need to have champions within government that can work across party lines and across sectors to leverage all of the capacity, the potential, the insight from these cross-sectoral partnerships to achieve the changes that we need to see for children across the sectors.
Yeah. You mentioned some of the challenges that you face. Could you speak to what some of them are?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I have my colleagues who lead programs on education and early childhood development and on child protection that can give you very specific details. But I think across the board, what we see are challenges in terms of the right data to make sure that we're pointing the limited resources and efforts that we have to the right investments to achieve change. The other challenges include infrastructure. They include access to services for the most vulnerable families and children to make sure that those children are not left behind, whatever the theme or the sector that we're working in. But they also include sustainable and effective investment in systems that will ensure that the changes that we achieve last or are sustained. But I can invite my colleagues Michelle and Denise to speak to specific challenges in relation to the areas that they lead.
To add to what Susan had said, I think that policy and legislative reform is also a huge challenge, especially in the area of child protection. And for me as well, I think that it's how violence is so tacitly condoned and it's so entrenched in our society that it has become a norm. So I think those have been great challenges for the child protection program.
And to just build on what Michelle is saying, in the work of early childhood development, we have started to address even the violence in the families and in the home. And so in order for children to be safe and to learn and to thrive, investment in early childhood development this past year, or in 2017, and in 2018 looking forward, has focused a lot on the care and support for children and for families. And in terms of increasing access, we've been working with families at the child health post the maternal health posts, the health centers, in communities where there's limited access to early childhood. We have trained providers going into the homes, counseling parents in terms of how to play and how to communicate with the child. And in doing so, we've been able to work and address violence as well. And so that's part of the cross-cutting work that we've been doing.
Yeah. In fact, I think that is perhaps one of the greatest issues that the entire society is very concerned about. And while we look at it in statistics in a number of persons who've been affected, we don't often focus so much on the psychological aspect and what it means for children, whether they see it on TV, whether they hear about it at school, or simply have adapted to the sound of gunshots in their neighborhood, or family members losing their life at an early age. How does UNICEF, with its partners, how have you been looking at this very critical issue in our country?
I think that's a really important question. Michelle is the expert in our work on child protection and will speak to that. But I think just to build on what Denise has said, it's critical that we recognize that it's going to be partnerships that are built that bring on board parents, that bring on board community members, organized civil society, the private sector, government, and like I said, government actors across sectors to work together to put in place, comprehensive support that shields the most vulnerable children and meets their varied needs, that helps to transform or to change the conditions that create, that create the kind of or that take away hope, or that take away the energies or distract the efforts of those at the community level who are trying to address violence. So we've really been trying to work at building together this kind of broad partnership that will inspire, motivate, organize, and help to really drive change in attitudes, in practices, and provide insight so that we can inform the programs and support the children that are most vulnerable. But I'll ask Michelle to give concrete examples around the kinds of programs that reflect this kind of partnership.
One of our partners in this initiative is Restore Belize, and we have a very important program with them called Metamorphosis, which is to build resilience in young men, especially in Southside Belize City, where most of the violence and gang and gun activity has really taken a hold of these young men. And what we have, the Metamorphosis program, as I said, fosters resilience in these young men between the ages of 10 and 14. So we have a screening process, and based on that, we have these young men participate in individual-based, community-based, and school-based programs. It also offers parenting classes, skills and knowledge to the parents of these young men. In terms of the programs that we offer, it's counseling, individual counseling, family support, mentorship, anything. It's really an individual screening process to see the unique needs of these young men. We are currently on the 3rd cohort with just over 30 boys, and we've really seen an impact that the program has had on these young men.
We had an extraordinary meeting at the end of the year organized by the Office of the Prime Minister to review the experience from Metamorphosis. And one of the things that they pointed out that really stayed with me is that parents of the most vulnerable boys are really struggling themselves. Because their struggle didn't start just with that child. Their struggle dates back many years to their own experience as young adults, their own experience as children, their continued experience in communities where so many different needs are yet to be met. And so mental health support, mental health services, support for parents, need to be integrated into programs that are addressing violence. It may not be the first thing that you think about when you think about a violence prevention program, but recognizing that the needs are complex and that we need to empower, enable these parents as well to be the positive actors and influencers that they want to be for their children is critical. So that's just one example of the kind of innovative and yet insightful programming that the Metamorphosis program has offered, and that UNICEF is hoping that will be supported and sustained and eventually emulated and better documented so that we can replicate it in other areas to serve the needs of our children.
That's such a fascinating and perhaps overlooked point, because we talk about focusing perhaps on the children, but we don't remember they have to go back into a particular environment where the parents simply may not possess the skill sets to help them. And that's one of the areas we know with early childhood. Not only are you working with children to access early childhood education, but you're also working with parents.
Yes.
So tell us a bit more about that.
Yes, definitely, Marlene. The parent support is very important, as you attested to just a while ago. And we find that in working with the families, we have that inroad to impact children, particularly if the parents have an understanding of how it is they should behave and what it is important for the child to grow up, especially at different milestones. So one of the areas that we've been working in is with the ministries of social development, human development, education, Ministry of Health. We've been working with technical officers in capacity building for rural nurses, for example, for the rovers from the roving caregiving program, with preschool teachers so that they are able to counsel parents on play and communication. And through this work, we've impacted over 1,200 parents, caregivers. What we've seen, particularly at the health centers, are young teenage mothers. We've even seen fathers, grandparents, aunts and uncles. And in some of these families and relationships, you're seeing a lack of understanding as to child development. You're seeing babies who are 1 year old being spanked or being hit or even being shouted at, and the caregivers are counseled in terms of what is important at that stage. And so a child who is one who may spill the milk is not really being rude or wants to cause be an annoyance. That child is being a child. And what are the particular moments that parents can build on so that that child can grow optimally? So these are some of the things that we're doing in this capacity building program called Care for Child Development. There's also parent education taking place, and in 2017 we had the first parent workshop with fathers in Punta Gorda. It was eye-opening. The things that they expressed and saw spoke to a commitment that they are going to make a better difference in the lives of their children. So with these ministries and with the cross-training that's taking place, we're able to reach more parents on the ground and in vulnerable areas. I'd just like to say as well that in counseling for play and communication, we're able to work with families that have children with disabilities and families where there are other needs so that they can be flagged or screened for greater support.
You know, you mentioned teenage parents, and I do understand that we have an alarming rate of teenage pregnancy, and so a lot of mothers are very young. Are there any programs by UNICEF that tries to deal with that issue of tackling teenage pregnancy?
Well, we have partners. We work with the Youth Enhancement Services, for example, and Michelle mentioned Restore Belize. We have partners, Child Development Foundation, who are directly working with these teenage mothers, and the programs that we support yes, reach the teenage mother in terms of, Michelle, maybe you can speak to more in terms of support for health. We're really focusing on adolescent health this time, and so, and in the parenting program that we've spoke about, also in terms of the care and support given to families. So our partners are making a difference there.
It's an important question. I wanted to just add, in fact, next week we are working with the Ministry of Health to support a stakeholder discussion on adolescent health, on teenage health. And we will be sharing what UNICEF, UNFPA and PAHO have put together, which is a guideline to help strengthen the programs in place across countries in the world to address teenage health, including prevention of teenage pregnancy, mental health support, STI and sexual reproductive health education, and a whole host of issues which are absolutely relevant to Belize. So it's a very, very timely effort to address exactly this particular issue and more.
When it comes to the issue of child protection, the other issue I think that is of great concern is looking at the situation of sexual abuse and assault that takes place with minors. And I always say this on the show, children under 18 are protected and should be protected, because very often once children pass 15, people
14.
seem to judge them differently, at least when they hear the age. Let's talk about the situation that we are facing in the country. And, you know, I have the horrible task of reading these stories on the newscast. And we see the reactions from the public as well in terms of the concern that we have that young girls and boys are forcibly put in these situations.
Well, the commercial sexual exploitation of children and sexual abuse is a very serious concern in Belize. I think that, again, this goes back to, you mentioned that as a child turns 15 and older, we seem to have a different attitude. Yeah. And again, I think that goes back to the tacitly condoned norms that the society has developed. And I think that it really takes time to get out of that. I think that it's important to have awareness building, and again, going back to legislation and policy changes, effective services for these children. It's really, I can't really stress on how important it is to raise awareness, to have services for these children that have been abused and violated, and to have the important policies and legislation in place to not to have the perpetrators, you know, arrested. And this is a crime. It's not said enough. It's not punished enough, and we can't just.
Let's identify some of perhaps the progress we've made, and also some of the gaps that are still there, because we're talking follow-up care and treatment for any person who has had any form of abuse. But there's also the preventative measures. So let's talk about where we're making progress and where there are still some gaps that need to be addressed.
I think progress has been made, especially in the younger generation, on the issue of sexual violence and abuse. You know, preliminary findings, knowledge, attitudes, practices, and behaviors on child abuse and reporting with children all over Belize. Children know what abuse is when they've been violated, how to report, and who to report to. So I think great progress has been made in that area.
What age group?
I think it was 7 to 14. It was conducted across the country in primary and secondary schools. And they recognize abuse, they know what sexual violence is, they know how to report. And I think that not enough attention has been placed on children, their voices on this issue, how to battle it, the problems that they face, the issues that they want to talk about. But again, I think that the gaps are in the legislation and slow policy changes.
We had some changes to the laws, strengthening and attempting to clearly define some of the the actual infractions. How much has that made an impact in changing or starting to change this problem?
As important as the changes have been, there's still gaps as in the age of consent, which is 16. Children that are below the age of 16 are could be held criminally accountable for engaging in sexual activity. The law in that area still hasn't changed. So while, yes, as when a law is passed, it does take time for it to take hold and be implemented properly. But we still have gaps, like I said, in especially the age of consent and the holding children accountable, criminally accountable for engaging in sexual activity under the age of 16.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think Michelle has put her finger on it. This issue really arises from tolerance within the community. And you hinted at that in the formulation of the question. And so one of the things that we at UNICEF have undertaken to do this year is to build on what has been a really successful effort in terms of the progress, really successful effort in collaboration with the Ministry of Local Government to establish what we call the Sustainable Child-Friendly Municipalities Initiative and the children's advisory bodies within that, to have children serve as advocates in their own community amongst their own peers, to help engage children in discussions about what the ideals are that they would like to see take root in their communities, and to agitate for change around those issues, including sexual violence and exploitation. And so this year, what we're trying to do is to expand and support that child engagement and participation, leveraging the power of technology so that we really amplify the voices of children on issues such as sexual violence, teenage pregnancy, and the changes, the experience of those in the communities around the country, and the changes that they would like to see, so that we can get real-time data, real-time voices entering into the national discussion to start to change the attitudes and address the issue of tolerance of sexual violence and exploitation.
You know, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I thought the children's advisory boards that work along with the town councils and city councils is definitely, we've had a couple of them on set. They're so intelligent and articulate.
Amazing.
And they really have a great grasp on some of the issues affecting children. My question has to do with looking at what progress has been made, because very often we can have the children express their concerns, but perhaps the follow-through doesn't take place. We had children on set talking about feeling unsafe because of people who were drunk on the streets. Street harassment has become a very important issue to children as well. How do you measure how much progress is made from the contribution of the boards?
I think that's again another really good question, and if Paulette Wade were here, who leads our work on the children's advisory bodies, she would tell you so much more. But briefly, all 9 municipalities in Belize now have established these children's advisory bodies, and so we now have to date between 18 to 20 children that have been trained and engaged to serve as advocates. They've received in the past year alone training on communication, training on violence and violence prevention, so they can recognize it and help their peers recognize it and advocate for it. We had a meeting organized with the Ministry of Local Government, and at the end of the year it was attended by the Deputy Prime Minister and CEOs from the Ministry of Human Development, and the children were able to present what they've achieved, and there's a wide range of substantive contributions from every single municipality, from improvement of recreational areas, lighting in recreational areas to address the issue of safety, they've advocated successfully in San Pedro, for example, to change, to get laws or bills passed so that alcohol is not sold directly next to the children's park. Again, to address the safety issue there. In Punta Gorda, the Children's Advisory Body has similarly addressed the issue of recreational spaces to make, and safety, road safety, to make transport from home to schools safer for children, but also the play areas safer. So in every single municipality, we're seeing suggestions from the children relayed to municipal governments, who are then taking action in terms of direct investments that are leading to greater safety, more inclusion, and actual change.
Now, we know that this is a part of building a child-friendly municipality. Are you advocating perhaps for more participation by children on other boards that are relevant to them? Or organizations, it could be schools. Yeah?
That's a good question, please.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, we have, and we've been working on diversifying the CAB to include children who are out of school, children who are differently abled. So there has been work in that area.
Yeah.
We've been able to tap into the voices of adolescents and children through one of our studies called the Out of School Study, which is looking at children who are dropping out or at risk of dropping out. So we've interviewed students in the schools, students in the communities, students at some of the alternative forms of education. And so right now the study is being reviewed by the government partners and by UNICEF to look at the recommendations coming out of that study, to look at areas that can be strengthened for further participation and for further inclusion of children. So that's just one. Michelle spoke about the knowledge, attitudes, and practices study that speaks to ending violence. And we've also been able to just tap into the schools and have students' participation as a part of the committee at some of these schools that are strengthening their principles in being child-friendly. So those are some of the areas.
The out-of-school report?
Yes.
So those recommendations were made by children, by students?
Some of them.
Because you know what I've noticed in Belize cities, there's an alarming rate of especially young men that aren't in school.
Yes, yes.
And I was talking to, I don't recall who I was talking to, and I said, you know, aren't they supposed to be in school, meaning you can't not be in school? And he told me that I think once you're past the age of 14, it's not compulsory that you attend school. Is that bad? You know, that you're at the age of 14, you can say, you know, I'm not going to school?
No, I believe that at the age of 14, it's compulsory for a child to be in school up to 14 years
but then
of
after
age.
that?
Yes, then after that. And coming out of the study, as I said, it's preliminary, and we're going to have further discussions on this.
Yeah.
There are many different factors that speak to why boys are dropping out. Finances, you know, and violence is also applied right there. So it's something that we're looking at in this month. We had a consultant who led that work along with government partners, and so we're just now delving into what it is that it's saying.
And I love that, you know, you're getting the recommendations from,
yes,
you know,
yes,
the
definitely
students,
some of them.
Let's take a moment to discuss the child-friendly courts, because we know we had UNICEF representatives on, I can't remember when it was the initiation of the pilot. How effective, where are we now in this pilot?
Great.
Yeah.
The court is in Punta Gorda, and it's running effectively. We are collecting data on the court, on the services that are being offered, and it also lets us know if children are being re-victimized. The services that children need when they access the court services. In 2016, over 700 family cases were heard at that court, and in 100% of these cases, children were able to access support, social services support. They were able to testify in a child-friendly room. And so our goal is to have a child-friendly court in each district.
Let me before you go further, explain to us why this is important for children. What's the difference between what was the court system before and what a child-friendly court offers?
Well, prior to 2013, children were, there were no safe spaces for children to be part of the justice system. They weren't child-friendly courtrooms. They weren't necessarily guaranteed access to a social worker and services needed. So when children interacted with the justice system as victims, as defendants, or as witnesses, they weren't afforded their rights. Child-friendly courts are really not a privilege. Their rights, the children's right to protection, to privacy, to not having to testify in an environment that threatens their security, that intimidates them. Those weren't a reality for us prior to 2013.
So if a child was abused, they had to face their abuser and recount all the details of what
More
took
than
place
once. So that's really the importance of the child-friendly courts, to protect the rights of the child.
And you said the hope is to be able to expand it beyond Punta Gorda?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a plan laid out for that as yet?
Yes.
Finances secured too?
Indeed, there is a plan. Our next child-friendly court we have an oversight committee, the Child-Friendly Courts Committee, and we have a plan to have the next court in San Ignacio. Now, this is a multi-sectoral effort with the government of Belize, UNICEF, and the U.S. Embassy. The plans for the San Ignacio court have been a bit strained because of lack of funding, and from, well, the U.S. Embassy, it was a multi-sectoral effort, as I said. UNICEF provides equipment, and the government provides the work, and so we've had a bit of strain with funding, but we, like I said, the oversight committee is there to see how we could work around that and push the work forward.
So the plan is
So
to
that is our
expand
priority this year. Yes, the plan is to expand to each district.
Now, when you reflect on the past year, and I know 1 year is hardly, your markers are usually more long-term. The impact that you make on the lives of children are more continuous and persistent. But if you look at 2017, what would you say are some of the very important accomplishments or milestones that you have been able to attain with your partners?
I think that it goes back to what I started off with, perhaps. In 2017, we launched what was a very successful study, the survey, the Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey on children, the first one, the only one that we've done in over 4 years for Belize, establishing data that provides benchmarks on where we stand right now on a wide range of issues to do with child well-being. We did that work with the Statistics Institute of Belize and launched that in May. That then put us in perfect position to be able to support the government of Belize as we prepared to report, to participate in the voluntary national reporting exercise that the government of Belize participated as one of the first 5 countries in New York. We were able to provide specific data on where we stand with respect to children in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals that we're going to be reported on. So that was an important contribution that we were able to make. That resource now stands. It's also informing the work in all of the program areas that we're supporting. The other areas where we've seen significant success, as Denise has laid out, is establishing that partnership with multiple ministries to create a cross-sectoral workforce to support better outcomes in early childhood. So working with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Human Development to make sure that we start to have in place a functional system that will reach the most vulnerable children and families and provide support to parents to help them achieve the outcomes they want for their children, because they're aware and that they have the skills to intervene early and effectively to put that child on track for success, for learning. That was an important series of trainings and partnership building that we put in place to strengthen that system. In the child protection area, we've really seen growth in terms of commitment and partnership to improve the way that the delivery of justice for children is achieved. We've also supported legal aid, expanding access to justice and counseling for vulnerable families in communities that have not been receiving legal advice. And so in that area as well, we've seen important strides. With the Ministry of Human Development, We've supported an expanded discussion on how to measure child poverty and make all of our investments more sensitive to what investment needs can help us really catalyze better outcomes for children, but by extension better outcomes for the community, because we've invested effectively in the youngest citizens. So we've made an important start to what is our 5-year program. Really focusing on the most marginalized children, strengthening of systems, informing our investments and programs through better use of data. And that's the model, that's the approach that we're using across all of the different programs, and that we'll build on.
And specific plans for 2018? the work continues.
Definitely to continue the work that we've been doing. But in building on the work in early childhood development, we want to continue the rollout of this capacity building called Care for Child Development. It's an effective parent support program, and in 2017 we were able to reach about 1,200 children as well, to impact these children. So the work will continue there, and the plan will be operationalized, where each ministry would know for certain what outcome they will be working towards and how they're going to strengthen the work in that outcome. So there should, for example, be more access for children in preschools, more children being screened at the health centers, as well as more children in the communities feeling safe and having that access to early childhood development. In education, the work continues in making schools quality. Quality learning is important. We have a lot of children in school in Belize, especially in the primary school system. So the strengthening of quality is one of the areas that we're looking at. And to do so, we're looking at child-friendly principles. How can the child feel safe and have the learning that he or she wants in that environment? So those are some of the areas. Strengthening health. Susan spoke about the multiple indicator cluster survey, and we've had gains in early childhood development, where we now have about 55% of children at preschool age accessing early learning, and that's been increased to around 32% in 2011. We've also seen a significant increase in breastfeeding, exclusive breastfeeding. It's now at 33%, where in 2011 it was at 14%. So we just have to continue this work so that when we do another multiple indicator cluster survey, we can see the gains. And so those are some of the small gains that we celebrate. There's also been some gains in child protection as well, and in some of the participation. So we will be continuing that work.
Well, for child protection, it's really strengthening the child-friendly courts, promoting access to justice for children, legal aid services for children. We currently have legal aid clinics going on, free legal aid clinics in underserved communities in Belize. Last year, we managed to visit 7 underserved communities. And now this year, we're planning to visit at least 10 more. So our first legal clinic this year is next week, actually, January 19th in San Ignacio and Santa Elena. And we will have more information on the clinics that we will have this year. So I encourage people to look out for it. Expanding services like Metamorphosis to other communities that are in need and making it unique to those communities, and really working on prevention aspect, the services for children, and really the policy and legal reform for children.
I think just to echo what my colleagues have said, the 2017 was the first year of our country program. It was a foundation year. And so we want for 2018 and beyond to build on that foundation. But I think especially just to reinforce, we want to build especially on the partnerships, reinforce our partnerships, especially partnerships with community. because the kind of social transformations that we're seeking and that we need to build for the long term are only going to succeed if we really engage, empower, and inspire communities, families, parents, and children. And so in 2018, we're really going to focus our partnerships on expanding the engagement of children and families so that we can sustain the direction, the trajectories that we've started to see that are showing this promise.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in and sharing this comprehensive update as to the work that you've been doing and what you look forward to do in the upcoming year.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by a nutritionist to talk to us about creating healthy meal plans. That's coming up after the break.